This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
Views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect those of WPSL. However, we do encourage you to like and share them on social media. That should say something to you right there. Howard Insurance of Port St. Lucie, every Wednesday evening at this time, presents the African American Scene, hosted by Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on a Wednesday night. Well, I missed you last week because the wife and I got away on a well-deserved vacation, and we went to go see our best friends who live in Long Island, New York. And so we spent 6 days up there, and it was really nice. We hadn't been together now for, I guess it was 3 or 4 years, with the pandemic and everything. So that was kind of nice. And their dog fell in love with us, and I think the dog was going to jump in our suitcase and try to come home with us, but we left for Isabel there. Well, anyway, I have a guest tonight, but let me give you a preview for what we're going to tackle next week. I'm going to get into this critical race theory thing. You've been lied to about that, and you know how I feel when I know you've been lied to. I try to set the record straight, and I promise you I will set the record straight on critical race theory next Wednesday night. So make sure you tune in. I'm going to give you the full background and history, and it is nothing like what they're telling you. It is just meant to be a divisive subject. And I'm going to introduce my guest, and he may have something he wants to say about that as well. Osvaldo Vasquez is my guest tonight, and he is one of the leaders of the Democratic Hispanic Caucus here in St. Lucie County, and I am just delighted to have him here. Say hello.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here, Rudy. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So did you have a comment about what I was talking about?
I have lots of thoughts. No, I appreciate it. Well, I guess breaking news today. So Governor DeSantis signed this bill. I think you heard about this, that now requires surveys of college faculty and staff throughout Florida. There's a lot going on. So I look forward to hearing what your thoughts are on all of the issues and all of the underlying disputes that go into this. But bottom line, I think there's a lot to talk about with our governor.
Oh, yes. The first thing, and we're not going to take any time away from you, but the first thing I want people to do, because they got time between now and next Wednesday, this is a 40-year-old subject. That's the first thing I want you to understand. They're making it seem like this all of a sudden popped up like yesterday as some great tragedy that's going on in our society. But this has been an academic theory that has gone on for 40 years. But anyway, but we're here to talk about the Hispanic Caucus. So Oz, for those of you that are not familiar with Oz ran for District 18 against Pam Keefe in the last election. And Pam won, and she didn't win the seat for Mast. But I met Oz when he was running at I forget what the function was at the room up there with Fallon. I forget where that was.
It's all a blur.
Yes, it is. Yeah, so much so. But anyway, so tell me, where did you grow up, Oz?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Port St. Lucie. I was actually born in Queens, so when you talked about Long Island, really reminded me of growing up. And we moved down here when I was about 8 years old, and grew up in Port St. Lucie, a New York transplant like so many folks. Went to high school here, actually met my wife here, and then moved away for college and AmeriCorps and a few other things. But Port St. Lucie's home.
AmeriCorps. That is very, very cool. That is one of those things, the Jewish Israel requires every person to do 2 years of service to the government. I think that's a good idea, and part of that 2 years could very easily be AmeriCorps in my mind, because I think it helps an individual grow when they experience another culture.
Absolutely.
Well, tell me, what was your experience like in there?
Sure. Well, I'm glad you asked. We graduated from college. Both my wife and I went to school in state. She went to Florida. I went to FSU, and we still found a way to see eye to eye, though. But afterwards, we moved up to Eastern North Carolina, and place neither of us had ever been. I was in Western North Carolina for a service trip before. And this was way back in the early years of the George W. Bush administration, when there was an expansion of AmeriCorps into faith-based organizations, a little controversial at the time. And we happened to be based in a group out of the AME Zion Church, the African-American church in New Bern in Washington, North Carolina. And I love how you talked about being exposed to different cultures and different communities, because the working with folks that were from different backgrounds. I didn't grow up in North Carolina. It had been a tobacco growing area, a textile growing or producing area, and had fallen on hard times, and a completely different experience from me. And at the time, there was also a large growth in the population of folks that were migrant workers, Central America, South America, and that was new to them, to the community there. And people were dealing with it, and they were being exposed to new folks, new ideas, new things. So we got to work on housing, economic development, health clinic, all sorts of things, and just really coming out of South Florida and having our own experience here. It was eye-opening. It was a great way of paying it forward, paying it back, and I'd recommend national service to anybody, really.
That's pretty cool. Was anything particularly shocking to you?
It was shocking. It was shocking how hard it was for a lot of people to let go of old habits, if that makes sense. So I worked, really formative experience. I worked mostly with he became bishop of the AME Zion Church, Reverend David Moore at the time. And similar background, he'd come over from California to Eastern North Carolina and had a little bit of an outsider's perspective. And when he came, he looked around and said, why are the election laws the way they are? At the time, the county we're in had the election system, frankly, that was rigged to ensure that the African-American community, minority communities could not elect people they wanted to elect. And that's what people were used to. And he shook things up. He filed a lawsuit, got things fixed, got things working again. But there were still people that did not accept that other voices could have a say in how the community ran. So we ran into a lot of resistance from folks that were trying hard to improve and were open to things. But there was a lot of language I would repeat on the radio, and a lot of thoughts that it was weird, and it was said like, people can't see me. I'm obviously brown, obviously Hispanic. It was said to me, and I was like, why would you think I would agree with you saying things about that about minorities? But people were just ingrained in their ways. But they were trying, to their credit, and we got to do a lot of good things, and it was a great experience.
Well, don't be surprised, because I've had times when people thought that they really knew me, and they got a level of comfort and said some things to me that I had to say, my friend, you just went down the wrong path. I'm not who you think you thought I was. That's out of bounds. And I had to get him straightened out and put him back on track. So I'm not shocked that happened to you, because it's happened to me, because people get a certain rapport and they think, well, I know you think just like I think. Well, no, I don't think like you. I'm more tolerant maybe than you, because I'm willing to listen to what you have to say. But so no, that doesn't surprise me. And then you went from FSU to East Carolina, and then you went to Michigan?
I did. No, so I was originally going to go straight through to law school, and realized that I was in college. I was involved in Habitat for Humanity and other groups that were trying to pay it back to the community. Something I did here growing up too, as an altar server. I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I didn't have anybody that had gone to law school. I thought like lawyer was, you go and you put on a gray suit and you work for 50, 60 years. So I wanted to do something different before going into law school, and I put law school on hold, did AmeriCorps, and then when it came time to go, Michigan, I had fallen in love with the school, and so started law school there, and it was a great experience. And very cold, very different for a Floridian.
Yeah. And come on, to stop being modest. And then you left Michigan and you went to?
I went to Harvard Law School. I did pretty well my first year at Michigan, and it had always been a dream to go to Harvard. And applied, got onto the law review at the same time. I actually found out about both the same week, which was a really nice week.
I would say, yeah. So you were on the law review?
I was, yes, sir.
Yeah, for which President Obama was very famous as being the president of the law review.
I have a lot of pictures in front of his portrait with the glass portrait that I took selfies of.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what was that experience like? A Florida boy in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
It was intense. Michigan is a top flight school, and
it is.
It's always in the top 10. Just a lot of very smart people there. And Harvard was very, very similar. I mean, there's a lot of intensity, a lot of very smart people, a lot of very dedicated people, and I mean, a lot of opportunities. I was pleasantly surprised by how much you did not have to go into the traditional sort of lawyer role that I thought. Like I worked for different clinics. I actually started a public service committee on the law review, and we had like a day of service, and I carried that forward after law school. So it was a pleasant surprise that way, but it was intense. There was a lot. I'm not going to lie.
Well, unfortunately, something I haven't learned till much later than I should have. There really is very few things that you can't do if you're willing to put in the sweat equity. Some people will have to put in less sweat equity than you, but if you're willing to put in the sweat equity, there's very, very few things that you can't do. You just might have to work a little harder at it than somebody else. And it's a shame that it took me so long to figure that out, because as a kid growing up, and I had two parents, and my mother was very encouraging. There was a lot of things I thought I couldn't do. I thought they were just beyond my capabilities. But as time's gone on, I've learned different. But it sounds like you accepted the challenge, and you went to Harvard, and you put in the sweat equity.
Absolutely. Well, that's what I was joked around when we were campaigning. We had a lot of work to do to win the congressional race. Unfortunately, didn't go our way. But I always told people I'm not a stranger to hard work. I washed dishes in high school and even after. And you don't get from washing dishes and waiting tables and bussing tables to Harvard Law without a lot of hard work and some luck. And I mean, there's that. But never been a stranger to hard work, and that's part of what motivated us to form the caucus as well, is the realization how much work we had to do, and how much was still left to do, but also just how much we could do and who were the ones to do it.
I am very pleased to when I got the phone call that you were interested in coming on the show. I was very pleased because when I was in school, I was very close with several. I learned a lot about Hispanics because I had some good friends that were Puerto Rican that I was in college with. So they taught me a lot about things I didn't know anything about. And I've often wondered why sometimes it appeared that the Hispanic population had become kind of reticent to their political actions. So I guess is that part of what kind of inspired you?
It was no, and after the primary, I'd reached out to different folks because I don't know if you remember, there were all these articles saying Biden and Trump are tied or Trump is ahead, especially among Hispanics. We didn't know at the time how things would turn out, and so I wanted to do something about it. And there have been a lot of articles written about why the Hispanic vote went the way it did in Florida. And don't get me wrong, we still, Democrats still won. We still do very well among Hispanics. We just didn't win by enough, and that's a question. But also, I mean, I have firsthand experience. My dad came over from Cuba before Castro, but he was super anti-Castro, and he was Republican. He passed away before even George W. Bush won the presidency, and I like to think that he would not have voted for Trump, but he was in that generation of folks that came over from Cuba and that reliably vote Republican, and there are a lot of reasons that they do, and that's one thing that we want to work on, reaching folks of that generation and closer to ours as well, to make sure that we understand why people are voting Republican.
Well, I understand that because, believe it or not, when I was a kid, I would venture to say probably most of my father's friends were Republican, because there was that a tie to FDR. And after that is when most of the African Americans began to flip. But before that, there was a strong allegiance to the Republican Party. Martin Luther King was a Republican. Jackie Robinson was a Republican, But then as time went on, the Democrats modified their position to be more inclusive, and it worked, and they pulled in more people. And look, your point is well made, because and I've said this before on the show, and if you want to call in, that phone number is 340-1590. Please feel free to call in and ask my guests any questions you might have. But one of the things about President Obama is, and a lot of people don't realize, is he never won the majority of the white vote. Never. He never won the majority. But he won because he had a solid African American, Hispanic, and Asian support that pushed him over the top, along with a good number of white brothers and sisters that supported him. And what I see now, and they're talking about in some of the reading that I've done, it seems that the Asians are more moving toward the Democratic Party too. So my question is, because I've often wondered, what is it that made the Hispanics look toward Trump?
That's a good question. A lot of people smarter than me are puzzling over it. But I actually want to go back to something you said just a little bit ago about when you're growing up and meeting folks that are Hispanic and sort of realizing the similarities and differences. And that's one thing that before AmeriCorps and even during AmeriCorps was realizing just how much we have in common, African Americans, Hispanics, and folks are white brothers and sisters. And it boils down to, a lot of times it boils down to wanting to have your family safe, be successful, have opportunities, and I mean that's universal. It comes in every language, and grown more to appreciate it from being a dad to two little ones. Donald Trump and the Republicans were able to spend a lot of money and to convince enough people that they were the ones looking out for folks' economic security and for their families. And they didn't have to, like you said, like the President Obama, and even before him and after him, Democrats on the presidential level, we have not won the white vote. As I understand, I think it goes back to like Dukakis.
Yep.
And it's a matter of winning enough of the white vote and enough of the minority vote to get to over 50%. And that's something that Donald Trump and his allies did the reverse of. Like they didn't win every African American voter, they didn't win every Hispanic voter, but they won enough, especially in Florida, that they were able to change the margins enough that they squeaked by in Florida. Luckily, not everywhere.
You're absolutely right. That exactly it was the reverse of Obama. That's a very accurate statement. Yeah.
And when I say people have looked into this and smarter people than I have, there's really good analyses about exactly who voted, who flipped, who switched over, and it's complicated. What it boils down to. There's Equus research, if I'm remembering the name right, looked at voters in South Florida and the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, and looked at who had switched among different subgroups. Surprisingly, it turned out to be Latinas. Hispanic American women went over to Donald Trump in enough numbers that it was determinative. At least in Florida and in Texas, they almost were able to unseat Representative Cuellar. That's what people respond to different things, and what people think is that on economic security, they were successful at trying to paint themselves as opening the economy, and Democrats want to shut the economy down. They were successful, at least in Texas, at on border security, saying we are the party that wants to employ more folks as border security and border guards, and Democrats don't. Like those kinds of things, different things speak to different people. But again, what it boils down to is these core principles, and we as Democrats, I'm a Democrat, obviously, we have to work a little harder to reach people and point out where the case that the Republicans are making is frankly junk, or frankly things I can't say on the radio.
Yeah, well, listen, that's why I started tonight with saying critical race theory. That is a bunch of garbage that they're out there spouting and spewing, and people are buying it. Just like from what I understand, I have a very close friend of mine. I haven't seen him now in a couple of years. He and I served on the chamber together, and he's from Cuba. And he's got a real concerns about socialism, being from Cuba. You know what I mean? And that's a bad prick with him. Any thought of socialism because of where he came from. But a lot of the changes that Democrats hope for are not really to try to turn the country into socialism. If people would just sit and listen carefully to what it is that we're trying to talk about and the things that we think need changes.
I agree. I think that we need to reach people where they are and get our message on what we want to do and what we want to make changes on. For example, President Obama was fantastic at this, that he was very good at saying, here's what I want to do for you, working class family. I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to put your kids in college, to get a good job, to do these things. If you want to take it even further, we wanted to expand Medicaid. Obamacare did that. Florida and our leadership has refused Medicaid expansion. Is that socialism? Is that a government-run program? Like we can spend hours debating on the playing field that Republicans try to build up, but President Obama was very good about just cutting forward and cutting through and saying, here's what I actually want to do for you. And one basic point that I think we kind of lose sight of sometimes is that people will give you the benefit of the doubt if they think, and even better if they know that you're fighting for them. If they know that, for example, President Obama and now President Biden are working 14, 15, 16-hour days or more for your family and for your community, and they'll sort of fill in the blanks. I think people are smart, and people will see the different pieces that go into how President Obama, President Biden, all the folks that we have in our leadership are fighting for them. Unfortunately, Donald Trump, he was able to use his money, and some other candidates were able to use their money to try to muddy the water a little bit and to try to complicate that fact. and to try to paint himself and themselves as folks that were fighting for people. And Donald Trump was successful with a lot of people in different groups of trying to paint the picture of him as a fighter for average people, for working people, and even to the point of just saying bad words. Like people like plain-spoken politicians, and they're willing to forgive a lot. And they were with Donald Trump at least enough, again, to work at the margins. But
go ahead.
Oh yeah, on critical race theory, I mean, we could, again, like the playing field that the Republicans set. It could be the caravan. If you remember back to 2018, that crisis. It could be Sharia law. That was what President Obama was up against.
Yes.
They want to indoctrinate our kids with Sharia law. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that it was about terrorism in 02, 04, and the Democrats. They want to change the Department of Homeland Security in order to make you less safe. Like they will start with the broad brushstrokes and try to fit everything in under that big umbrella. And I mean, at the core, I think that there are a lot of people in good faith that we need to reach. That there are people that, for whatever reason, are concerned with, are my kids getting indoctrinated? And they'll see on Twitter, on Facebook, like clips, video clips, something that that is pulled out for them that says, oh, hey, here in Portland, this teacher said this, or hey, here in San Francisco is their favorite target. Oh, this teacher said this, and aren't they nutty? Where they're going to find examples to point out and pull out, no matter what they call it. And they're going to try to build that up as what Democrats are for. And that's not what we're for. We're for working people, and we are for people having a shot, having an opportunity, the American dream, like I had, like you had.
Why is that so hard to understand? They think we want to take things from them. People think that we want to take things from them, that we want freebies going out of the world. What we want is just what you said, and I've tried to tell this to several conservatives. I don't want anything from you. I don't want your money. I just want the same chance and the same opportunities that you've had. I'm happy with that. If I got that, I'm perfectly happy. I want to be not afraid to get picked up by the police, and that I'm going to be afraid when they get me because something might happen to me. I don't want to feel that. You don't feel that. Why should I feel that? That's what we want. We don't want a special treatment. Like what they have done is, in many instances, is made people think that we want somehow special treatment because we're minorities, and that's just not the case. That is not what we seek at all. We just seek the equal. Look, I said this before on my show, probably 6-7 years ago. As a former athlete, I'm a fat one now, but I used to be a very fit one. As a former athlete, I hate affirmative action. Hate it with a passion, because I don't think any man is better than me. And I'll compete with any man on an equal playing field. But I support it because the playing field ain't fair. I'd have to be a fool not to support it because the playing field just not fair. And if that playing field was ever fair, I'd be the number one person waving the flag to get rid of it, because I enjoy competing. I enjoy the competition, you know? And that's the bottom line. But, so what is your current membership right now? If you can comment on any of that if you want. And again,
sure.
If you want to call, the number is 340-1590, 340-1590. Go ahead.
Sure. So, well, first, I'm also out of shape. I don't have I don't have an athletic background to point to. There's that. But no, I agree. I think that it can be tough to get the message across of, I just want the same opportunity, and like you were saying before about and feeling safe and feeling that you're being treated the same way. People want their kids to be safe, their communities to be safe, and we have to be aware of that. We also have to be aware that there are things that we can do to fix a very real problem that we have in America. And the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, Congressman Mass voted against, was a step in that direction. And we can do those things without making our communities less safe. I think that gets lost in, you guys just want to defund the police. And what's even worse is that Governor DeSantis and his allies in the legislature went even further and took away local control. They say they're conservatives. They say they're all about local control. They're all about government. They took away our community's ability to make the decisions on police funding. So you and I agree, like we want to make sure we have safe communities, but we don't even get that voice under the Republicans in Tallahassee. I think we have a call.
Yes. We have Andrew on line 1. Yes, sir.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Okay.
I want to listen to your show for the longest time. I just started, so I really appreciate you being on and everything. I guess I got a question for I don't know whose name. Sorry,
Oz.
Yes.
Mr. Vasquez.
Yeah. What do you say to like a white, like, okay, so my best friend is white. You saved my life multiple times. We were Boy Scouts together, and I was drowning. He saved my life many times. He's my best friend. But it's just like he can't. When you talk about the way whites have treated blacks in the history of it and stuff like that, how do you get them to understand that it's not, when you talk about, like, say, white supremacy, it's not that you're going after all white people. It's how do you get past that white guilt phase where it's like they it's not, you're not talking about the white people that are it's kind of sounds bad to say, the white people that are good, white people that are bad, but there's good and bad in everybody. I feel like, okay, so the word racism, they really like to throw it out there, but I feel like racism is oppression. You can't oppress if you're not in the majority, and that's what makes what's the white supremacy so terrible and so substantial. Like, we love to say, oh, black people are racist. Well, everybody has prejudice. And I feel like everybody's throwing this word racism out. Racism is about oppression. And you can't oppress if you're not in the majority. Like, could you talk about, like, the fact that that word is they'll say that black people can be, I don't think blacks can be racist because we're not in the majority in this country. And I just hear it a lot. I see it on a lot of threads and YouTube things. And I just feel like maybe somebody can explain to them the reason why a lot of people think, when we think racism, we think white people, it's just because they're the majority, and you have to, racism is about oppression. It's not just prejudice. That's all I want to say.
I appreciate that question. And that's a good point. It is the root of what we try to solve for in racism is to get rid of oppression, to get rid of things that take away opportunity from us. And so we may not see eye to eye on this, Rudy. I get the very big benefit of looking at this country through the eyes of an immigrant, through the eyes of my parents. And I'll
take the question.
I appreciate it. So I get the very big benefit of seeing America as a land of opportunity and coming with fresh eyes and knowing that we are the country that we signed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and created a more just, more equal society before anybody else in the world did. That said, at the same time that our founding fathers were doing these fantastic things, they were working in a system that was unequal. And we've through a very, very bloody civil war and through a lot of actions from a lot of people, a lot of very, very brave people, have addressed some of the issues, not all of them, that have been there. And we still need to do more. Like when Rudy was talking about not having an equal playing field, that's what we're trying to solve for, to make sure that people have opportunity, that people aren't kept out of neighborhoods that they should be in, kept out of schools that they should have the chance to go to. We say that, and that's complicated. That's probably a longer answer than it should be. But we say that, and it's complicated. It's nuanced, and the DeSantis administration, the Republicans in Tallahassee, picked that up. And I think it was a few days ago that Governor DeSantis said, "We don't want our kids to be taught to hate this country." Nobody's teaching our kids to hate this country. Nobody's teaching our kids to be anti-American. When you talk about the Tulsa Race Massacre, when you talk about all these things that are in ancient history, one of my favorite quotes from President Obama was when he talked about the author escapes me, but it'll come to me after we finish the show. There's a fantastic quote that says that the past isn't really gone. It's not even past. Like, some of those things carry forward, and that's what we try to fix. That's what we're trying to do by making sure that we have more educational opportunities, making sure that we have checks in people's pockets for the stimulus, all these things. That's what Democrats stand for, and we can't allow ourselves to be pigeonholed into, well, you're teaching our kids to hate America. Nobody's doing that.
Let me respond to one of the things that Andrew asked, which is, how do you help your white friends with understanding what your position is regarding race? They first have to be willing to have an open mind, okay? I have some white friends that get it completely. They send me stuff on Facebook. If I make a post, they'll write back and say, I got it, but that's because you want to get it. See, here's the difference that we have that a lot of people don't have. We had to learn how to deal with white folks because the majority of the people that we had to deal with in order to be successful were white folks. So we had to understand their mores and the things that are important to them. It was important because we would not be successful without understanding how to travel that path. They have never had to learn how to understand us. And the people that understand us are the people that have wanted to understand and make a purposeful effort to understand, i.e. reading, or just even raising a level of sensitivity that allows them to understand. But the thing that I talk about on here most often, and I'm glad that you brought up that you have a different perspective coming from another country. Here's the thing that I is really important for me, for you to understand and all my listeners to understand. I am an American as American can get. I don't know the first damn thing about Africa. I couldn't trace any of my family members back to Africa. My skin tells me that I'm from Africa, but I'm American. I just happen to be a black American. We've had black people have died in every war in the history of this country, starting with the American Revolution, the Civil War, the War of 1812, World War I, World War II. We have fought in every war to try to defend this land, which we call home. And as an American, I'm entitled to all that the Constitution has told me that I'm entitled to as an American. And it really is no more complicated than that. That's it in a nutshell. And I think we've earned the right to have all of the things that the Constitution has promised us, even though when it was written, it really didn't mean for it to apply to us. Time has said that, yes, it does. So I'm off my soapbox now. So every once in a while, I get up on my soapbox. That number again is 340-1590. But that's the thing that so a lot of times, for me personally, when I think about somebody who's been here maybe 2 generations and they want to sit in judgment of me, I resent that. They're not entitled to sit in judgment of me. We were here long before you. And how dare you get a chance to judge me and tell me whether I'm American or not? That just really, if you want to get my goat, that really makes me as mad as anything can make me, because I don't think that is right.
I get that. I should mention, by the way, our group is meeting by Zoom tomorrow. We have a regular meeting every third Thursday of the month, and our email is tcdemocratas@gmail.com.
Oh,
TC for Treasure Coast, Democratas, like the Spanish word for Democrats with an A before the S, at Gmail, the company that owns all our information.com. So love to continue the conversation, and we'd love for folks to come join us, kick the tires, and kind of see what we're all about. But back on the soapbox. No, this is an absolutely important conversation, and it can be a difficult conversation to have. And I think that a lot of people are concerned because a lot of politicians, and I'm not a career politician or anything, the folks on the other side will pull out threads and say and take any opportunity. Again, Governor DeSantis, he and his allies want nothing more than to be able to say, see, these guys hate America, and these guys even more. The subtext is they hate you. They want to take things from you. They think you are a racist.
That's right.
And that's the problem. And I think the way to address that, and again, smarter people than me have wrestled with this, is to find that commonality. Like going back to the AmeriCorps experience, going back to what you were talking about with growing up, and like being able to find friends on every different community, every different perspective, and see things the way they are. And I've been lucky. I mean, one really big benefit of being a lawyer, one of my mentors said it, and she put it much better than I will, but you get to walk in other people's shoes and see their experience. And I've always worked in workplace law. I represented union members, and I got to go and go to firehouses and see how firefighters live and work and do things. And now I'm working for working people, retirees. I do employee benefits law. You get to see how other people live. And even one thing I shared during the campaign, I've been pulled over and I've been stopped. Here in Stewart during high school, I was searched. I had no idea what my rights were. When I was clerking, I had my fancy degree, and I was working for a fancy federal judge. And just like randomly, I went for a bike ride and was stopped, and didn't know I couldn't go in a specific place. And so, and I looked all scrubby and stuff, and people don't see me on video. I can look like just like a random person, and they challenged me. These police officers challenged me, and I could have said like, I have a law degree and I work for a federal judge. I wouldn't have said I work for a federal judge. I would have gotten in trouble. But I got that experience that a lot of people don't get of feeling like you are less than or being treated differently. And I've been lucky to have those experiences. And you might not call it luck. People that have not had those experiences, that are willing to talk to people that have and see things the way they see things, I think are fantastic. And I think we need to engage with them and need to start from a place of how do we find a common understanding, how do we find a way to address the issues that we have. And on the other side, I mean, I think we as minorities, and we might phrase it differently, I think we as minorities have to look at the perspective that folks in the white community have when they're listening, they're hearing all these messages from governors. I hate to pick on Governor DeSantis. He's somebody he can really pick on, but they're listening to folks like him that are trying to get into race baiting and into demagoguery, and they're sort of primed to think, hey, this person is going to think I'm a racist, and we should understand that people have been conditioned to hearing these messages and find a way to work with them and kind of see things from where they're coming from. And just the same way, like you said, Rudy, that how are you going to judge me? I'm an American. People on the other side of that conversation are thinking the exact same thing. How are you going to judge me? I'm an American. My family came from Poland. I have no idea what happened to you in your communities in the 1750s, 1760s. That's a very complicated conversation to have. But I think the more the conversations we have like that, I think the better.
I think that's fair, and I think that I have spent an enormous amount of time trying to understand. One of the things I do understand, because I've done enough reading about it, is that people, in large part, are fearful of the change that they see coming around the corner. They're afraid that, people keep talking about 2040, this is going to be a majority minority country, and they're looking at that and they're going, man, is this still going to be my America in 2040? And to that I say, my God, this is my America too.
Well,
this is my America too. What the hell do you think's going to happen in 2040? You think I'm going to stop? It's going to stop being my America just because now there's more brown people than there are white people? I think not. I'll feel as strongly about America then as I do now.
Absolutely. No, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's something I've thought about a fair amount. Well, first on just on the data and on how things look, those numbers come from saying that if you're mixed race, if you have a Hispanic or African American mother but a white father, you're no longer white. Like it's complicated, and that's where the majority minority comes from. But and the issue manifests itself different ways. Like I've heard from people that say, I don't want to choose English or Spanish when I call and try to call AT&T or whatever else. People are fearful of change, and it's not anything new. Like if you look back at our history, the Know Nothings started off with the American Party or whatever in the 1830s, 1840s, and their target was Catholics. We're all going to be Catholics. Catholics are taking over.
Yes.
Look back, fast forward a few decades, Italian Americans, Irish Americans. No one that I've seen has ever talked about in the last 10, 20 years what the Italian American vote looks like and things like that. Like people don't even conceptualize Italian Americans as different, as not American. But they did it one time, and that's how a lot of people stayed in power. A lot of people demagogued about it. It's nothing new under the sun. It's what they're trying to run now. And the answer to that is, like you said, we're American, and our kids are American, and the America we're trying to build is one that works for all of us. And in order to get there, we want to work together and want to put aside the folks that are trying to divide us, because they've always tried to divide us. That's their playbook.
Yes. Listen, I got 2 biracial granddaughters. 2. And boy, I'll tell you what, I'd take a bullet for them in a half a second. I'd protect them with my life. So, I mean, they're my granddaughters. I don't care about all the other stuff is unimportant. So, but, we have to just continue to work to develop relationships across lines. One of my fraternity brothers is Puerto Rican, and we found each other on Facebook, and we have since communicated back and forth probably every week, once or twice a week, we talk to each other. But so I think there's hope. How many people are in your organization right now?
We're up to about 30, 40 full members. So we membership is open to everybody. You don't have to be Hispanic. You don't have to speak Spanish. And you do have to be a Democrat or somebody that supports our goals. And we are working in St. Lucie, Martin, Indian River, and planning to work in Okeechobee County as well. We do voter registration. We did outreach on COVID vaccine. We're planning to do more on it. All those things to reach the community, build the community's power. So for paying members, we're about 30, 40. We can have folks come and join the meeting and kind of kick the tires and stuff. And we'd love to work with anybody that shares our goals, and that I mean, even if you want to just talk about the issues that we've talked about, because I think that's how we move forward, is have these conversations.
How much is your dues?
$20 for annual dues for folks that want to be full members. But again, we have associate members or folks that if you aren't able to register to vote, can't register as a Democrat, we have people that can be members as well. And I mean, if the dues are a problem, we can talk about that too. I mean, we've had donations, contributions, and stuff, and so we can probably cover dues as well for some folks.
What is the demographics of the Hispanic community in St. Lucie County?
In St. Lucie, we're about 20%. It's about 19 and change of our population is Hispanic American, and throughout the Treasure Coast, it's from 13% in Indian River to about 26% in Okeechobee. And then in terms of when you say demographics, I'm assuming like country of origin or where folks come from. It's mixed. It's not as sort of it's not like South Florida or Central Florida where I'm half Cuban, half Colombian. A lot of Cuban Americans in Miami-Dade. We have a lot of folks that are congressional lines to Puerto Rico, Central America, South America, and I think maybe like a plurality in Port St. Lucie at least is Puerto Rican American. Or Puerto Ricans are Americans, but I think that's sort of the majority. But it's not anything like in Miami-Dade, where there's like one group that stands out.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, what do you think Democrats have to do to more effectively communicate to the Hispanic community?
Well, we're working on that. Part of it is listening. And so we want to make sure that we understand why folks are not voting for Democrats and are not registering as Democrats. I mentioned the numbers and the percentages. We have about 20% of our Treasure Coast community is Hispanic, and smaller numbers even registered to vote. And then of those, got a lot of folks that are registered as Democrats already, but a lot of folks that are registered as independent NPAs. We got to find out why they're not registering. My own sense, my own take is that again, people want the same things that other communities, all communities want. Somebody who's going to fight for them, somebody who's going to work for them, somebody who's going to stand up for them, and make sure that they and their families have the chances that we are entitled to as Americans. We have to find a way to make sure that we communicate that effectively. Part of it too is one of our goals is to make sure that we have Hispanics that are elected. Our population is big, but we don't see that reflected in power. So we need more folks that are county commissioners or Hispanic city commissioners, and all up and down the ballot. And that's a problem in Florida. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about, Senator Rubio is Cuban American. We have Congressman. I know we're running short on time, but the short point is we have folks in Congress now that are Hispanic American from Florida. One of them, Congressman Soto, is Democratic. The rest, I think there's 4, if I'm counting right, are Republicans. And last Cuban American governor, Republican. Last Cuban American senator, current Cuban American senator, Republican. So we've got to make sure that we reflect all of our populations, all our communities, and have people see in themselves and in their party the representation. That's one thing we're working on. But again, back to the hard work point too. We have work to do. This isn't like an overnight thing. It's something that we're working on to build the basis for, so we can succeed and to get to those goals that we all want, to make sure that we have a better community, better Florida for all of us.
So leave some information on how people can get in touch with you or email you as we close out the show. And I'd like to thank you.
Really appreciate it. I'd like to thank you, Rudy.
Give me your communication information.
Absolutely. So tcdemocratas@gmail.com. Our phone number, 772-202-8540. We're on social media. And if you go to Martin County Democrats, all one word, .com, we have a page on their website. We're working on our own website page as well.
Thanks again, Oz. And folks, I'd like to thank you for tuning into the African American Scene. God bless and be safe, and I will see you right here next Wednesday for the African American Scene.
The African American Scene with Rudy Howard. An exciting guest from time to time, too. Archives are on YouTube at WPSLTV.com, and the African American Scene is heard every Wednesday evening in the 6 o'clock hour right here.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.